Darkness. Total. Absolute. Nothing but sound. A drum somewhere in the void, beating like a sick heart. Each strike louder than the last, as if the earth itself were pulsing from its bowels. And then, in the blackness, a voice. Barely a whisper. A man speaking in a language almost no one remembers anymore. Nahuatl. The words sound like a prayer, like a plea, like a farewell. We don't understand what he's saying, but something inside us, something ancient and primal, perfectly grasps the tone. It's fear. It's the sound of the end of the world. The image appears slowly, as though someone were opening their eyes after being struck, blurry at first, then sharper. Water. A vast, still lake reflecting a sky the color of ash. And in the middle of that lake, like a mirage, like a dream that refuses to vanish, a city. Tenochtitlan, at the largest city in the Western Hemisphere. More populous than London, more imposing than Seville, more complex than anything 16th century Europeans could imagine. White temples rising toward the clouds, stone causeways cutting across the water like veins, canals where canoes glide loaded with flowers, corn, jade, cacao, a marketplace where 30,000 people buy and sell every single day, floating gardens of a green so vivid it seems invented, an entire civilization built on water, on mud, on faith in gods who demanded blood to keep the sun alive. But something is wrong. We feel it before we see it. The smoke, a thick black column rising from the heart of the city, from the Templo Mayor, staining a sky already sick. And if we look closer, if we let our gaze descend onto the causeways, we'll see the bodies, dozens, hundreds, are thrown along the edges of canals, floating in murky water, piled against palace walls. Men, women, children, some with sword wounds, clean, brutal cuts that only Toledo steel can carve into human flesh. Others marked by smallpox, that invisible disease that arrived before the cannons, that killed more than any army ever could. It is August 1521. What we're witnessing is not a battle. It's an agony. The final breath of a civilization that ruled the Valley of Mexico for 200 years. And before we plunge into this darkness, if these kinds of stories grip you, subscribe to the channel. It's completely free, costs you nothing, but it helps us enormously to keep creating content like this. One click. Do it now, because what comes next won't let you think about anything else. Let's go back to the beginning. February 1519. Hernán Cortés leaves Cuba with 11 ships, 508 soldiers, 100 sailors, 16 horses, and 14 pieces of artillery. He's 34 years old. He's neither tall nor particularly strong. He's an educated man. He studied law at Salamanca for 2 years before the thirst for adventure pushed him toward the New World. He understands the power of words as well as the power of weapons. He can persuade, seduce, manipulate. He's a politician in armor, a lawyer with a sword, a dreamer with the cold blood of a killer. And he has just disobeyed the direct order of his superior, Governor Diego Velázquez. There is no going back. If he fails, prison and disgrace await. If he succeeds, eternal glory. On the coast, Cortés acquires 2 decisive tools. Jerónimo de Aguilar, a shipwrecked friar who speaks Mayan, and Malinche, a young Nahua woman sold into slavery among the Maya, who speaks both Nahuatl and Mayan. Malinche is far more than a translator. She's intelligent, shrewd, and she knows the political dynamics of the indigenous world like the back of her hand. She knows which peoples hate the Mexica, which fear them, which would be willing to ally with anyone to free themselves from Tenochtitlan's yoke. Cortés makes her his closest advisor. The coastal peoples speak of a distant, powerful, terrible city, Tenochtitlan. the heart of an empire that collects tribute from hundreds of nations, demands warriors for its sacrifices, and holds half a continent in submission through a combination of military force, compelled trade, and religious terror. The Totonacs of Champuala are the most explicit. They despise the Mexica. Cortés listens, and in his mind, an idea that was probably already there takes concrete shape. He hasn't come to explore. He hasn't come to trade. He's come to conquer. He founds Villa Rica de la Vera Cruz, a legal masterstroke that grants him authority directly from the Spanish crown, bypassing Velázquez entirely. Then he orders the ships scuttled from within. No ships, no retreat. Every man now knows there are only two options: conquer or die. Cortés has turned his soldiers into prisoners of his own ambition. And strangely, that makes them stronger. The Mexica Empire he's about to confront is a marvel of complexity. Founded around 1325, when Mexica priests saw an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a serpent on an islet in Lake Texcoco, it became the dominant power of Mesoamerica in less than 2 centuries. But its control rests on tribute, not bureaucracy. Subject peoples feel exploited, humiliated, and human sacrifice, the pulsing heart of Mexica religion, feeds the ruler's faith as much as the ruled people's rage. Moctezuma Xocoyotzin, the Tlatoani, is not the cowardly ditherer popular history has manufactured. He's a complex, intelligent, deeply religious man. A former high priest, he reads the omens with mounting dread. Comets, temples catching fire, pillars of flame at dawn, and now pale men arriving from the east in floating houses. He sends Cortés magnificent gifts: golden wheels the size of wagon wheels, silver discs, quetzal feathers. The gift meant to deter the invader becomes the magnet that draws him closer. The first great miscalculation. Cortés marches inland. In Tlaxcala, he fights fierce warriors for weeks. But European weapons, steel, horses, yet gunpowder, are incomprehensible nightmares for the defenders. The obsidian-edged swords, sharp as scalpels but brittle as glass, shatter against iron armor. The horses, animals no indigenous person has ever seen, cause visceral panic. The Tlaxcalans surrender, then ally. Their logic is merciless. The Mexica are their mortal enemies. These strangers with impossible weapons are marching on Tenochtitlan. Therefore, they are potential allies. The Tlaxcalan alliance is arguably the single most decisive military factor of the entire conquest. Without it, Cortés would have lacked the numbers, the logistics, and the knowledge of the terrain to survive, let alone conquer. At Cholula, a sacred city allied with Tenochtitlan, Cortés orders a massacre. 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 dead, depending on the source. The message reaches Tenochtitlan, loud and clear. These strangers are capable of devastating violence. On November 8, 1519, Cortés enters Tenochtitlan along the Iztapalapa causeway. Moctezuma greets him in person, carried on a litter covered in quetzal feathers and adorned with jade and gold. Two worlds that have existed apart for millennia look each other in the face for the first time. The man from Extremadura in his dented armor and dusty beard, and the Tlatoani in his quetzal plumes and priestly gaze. The Spaniards are housed in the palace of Axayacatl. Then Cortés, ever calculating, arrests Moctezuma. The Tlatoani becomes a prisoner in his own city. When Cortés must leave to deal with Pánfilo de Narváez on the coast, he leaves Pedro de Alvarado in command. Alvarado is impulsive, aggressive, violent. In May 1520, during the festival of Toxcatl, he attacks unarmed Mexican nobles and warriors dancing in the sacred precinct. It is a slaughter. Steel swords cut through cotton and flesh like butter. Blood splatters the temple walls, and Tenochtitlan erupts in revolt. Cortés returns, defeats Narvaez, absorbs his soldiers, but finds a city at war. He tries to use Moctezuma to calm the crowd. The Tlatoani steps onto a terrace and is pelted with stones by his own people. He dies days later. With him dies any possibility of a negotiated solution. The night of June 30th, 1520. La Noche Triste. The night of sorrows. Cortés orders the retreat along the Tlacopan causeway. In the rain, in the dark. The Mexica discover them almost immediately. What follows is hell. The causeway is breached in several places. The portable bridge gets stuck. Their canoes attack from both sides. Soldiers weighed down with gold sink like stones. The screams of the dying, the shrieks of wounded horses, the drums that never stop. Everything merges into a symphony of nightmare. Over 800 Spaniards and thousands of indigenous allies die that night. But Cortés survives. At Otumba, in a desperate battle, he achieves an improbable victory by capturing the Mexica general's battle standard, triggering the enemy army's retreat. He reaches Tlaxcala and begins rebuilding. For months he weaves a network of alliances with dozens of peoples. And meanwhile, smallpox ravages the indigenous world. Cuitláhuac, the new Tlatoani, dies of the disease. His successor, Cuauhtémoc, inherits a decimated empire. By spring 1521, Cortés is ready. 900 Spanish soldiers, tens of thousands of indigenous allies, and 13 brigantines built in Tlaxcala, carried in pieces across the mountains and assembled on the shores of Lake Texcoco. The siege begins on May 26th, 1521. It will last 75 days. The Chapultepec aqueduct is severed. Without fresh water, the city is doomed. The Spanish columns advance meter by meter along the causeways, fighting through barricades of stone and wood that the Mexica rebuild every night. The Mexica fight with a ferocity that impresses even their enemies. Cuauhtémoc organizes the defense with remarkable efficiency. Eagle warriors and jaguar warriors fight on the front lines with suicidal determination. But the city destroys itself as it is conquered. Every building taken is demolished. Every canal filled with rubble. Inside, agony. No drinking water. No food. People eat lily roots, lizards, rats, boiled leather. Smallpox keeps killing. Corpses pile up everywhere. The stench is unbearable. Sweet, heavy, sticky, invading the nostrils and never leaving. It is the smell of collective death, and all of Tenochtitlan reeks of it. In mid-June, the Mexica capture a group of Spaniards and sacrifice them atop the Templo Mayor, in full view of their comrades. The Spaniards watch helplessly as their companions' chests are sliced open, their hearts ripped out and offered to the sun. Bodies tumble down the steps. The drums don't stop. The psychological impact is devastating. In late July, Cortés offers peace. Cuauhtémoc refuses. He cannot surrender. The warrior culture that shaped him, the sacred responsibility he assumed as Tlatoani, forbids it. Surrender would betray the gods, the ancestors, the warriors dying for him. And so the war continues, and Tenochtitlan's agony drags on. August 1521. The final days. The city is no longer a city. It's an open-air cemetery. The warriors who still fight do so as ghosts, skeletal, covered in sores, eyes sunken into their sockets, gripping weapons they no longer have the strength to lift. Women and children flee toward the lake's edges, trying to escape in canoes, but the brigantines intercept them. The stench of Tenochtitlan can be smelled for miles. The Spanish soldiers advancing through the streets vomit inside their helmets. Even the indigenous allies, hardened to war, recoil at what they see. Corpses everywhere, bloated, greenish, covered in flies. The water in the canals is thick, dark, impossible to look at without the stomach turning. August 13th, 1521. The last day. Cuauhtémoc tries to escape by canoe. Yet the brigantines intercept him on the lake. Brought before Cortés, the young Tlatoani, emaciated but standing tall, says, "I have done everything I was obliged to do in defense of my city. I have a dagger at my belt. Kill me with it." Cortés does not kill him, not yet. Tenochtitlan has fallen. The Mexica Empire, which for 200 years was the dominant power of Mesoamerica, has been annihilated. The most conservative estimates put the death toll during the siege alone at 100,000. Most did not die by the sword, but by hunger, thirst, and disease. What remains of Tenochtitlan after the fall bears no resemblance to the wonder the Spaniards first saw. The pyramids are heaps of rubble. The canals overflow with corpses and debris. The floating gardens are trampled and burned. The codices, painted books containing the history, the astronomy, poetry, and philosophy of an entire people, will be burned by the hundreds. Knowledge accumulated over centuries becomes black smoke rising toward a sky that no longer listens. Cortés orders a new city built on the ruins. The capital of New Spain will rise literally on the bones of the Mexica capital. Temples will be replaced by churches. The Templo Mayor will be buried under layers of colonial construction and will not see daylight again until 1978. Cuauhtémoc will be kept alive for 4 years, tortured to reveal treasures that probably never existed, then hanged in 1525 from a ceiba tree in the Honduran jungle. The last emperor of the Mexica, hanging from a sacred tree, far from his city, far from his lake, far from his gods. The fall of Tenochtitlan was not merely the defeat of a city. It was the end of a universe, was a universe with its own stars and calendars, its own gods and truths, its own way of understanding what it means to be human. That universe survived in fragments, in languages still spoken, in rituals blended with Catholicism, in the faces of millions who carry the blood of both worlds. But the complete vision died in August 1521, and with it died a possibility. The possibility that humanity might have been something different from what it is today. Today, if you walk across the Zócalo in Mexico City, you are stepping on the stones of Tenochtitlan's sacred precinct. Beneath your feet, just meters below, lie the foundations of the Templo Mayor. The cathedral, built with stones ripped from the pyramids, slowly sinks into the soft ground that was once a lake. The National Palace rises over the ruins of Moctezuma's palace. The modern city, yet with its 22 million people, its deafening traffic, its smog, its skyscrapers and taco stands, is a palimpsest. One story written over another story that was erased, but never truly silenced. Because the silence is never complete. If you listen carefully, if you close your eyes amid the noise of the Zócalo, and let the modern world fade for a moment, you might hear it. The echo of a drum made of human skin, the murmur of a prayer in Nahuatl, the splash of a canoe on a lake that no longer exists, the beat of a heart that was ripped out 5 centuries ago, but somehow, impossibly, miraculously, still beats. Beneath the concrete, beneath the asphalt, beneath the layers of history and forgetting and conquest and resistance, still beating. And it will keep beating long after we and our cities, and our empires, and our gods now have been forgotten too. The darkness returns. The drums go silent. And then nothing. Only the echo of what we were, of what we might have been, of what we will never be.